What if I told you that for over 100 years after its discovery, America was almost completely ignored, and no one even realized it was a continent? Today, it's one of the most powerful nations on Earth. But the story of how that happened is full of mistakes, wars, lucky decisions, and massive turning points. Let's break it down. The discovery that wasn't understood. Before Christopher Columbus ever sailed west, the world map looked very different. Europe, Africa, and Asia were known. But across the ocean, there was a mystery. The Vikings had actually reached North America centuries earlier. They called it Vinland, but their discovery was forgotten by most of Europe. So when Columbus set sail in 1492, he wasn't trying to find a new world. He was trying to reach Asia faster. Instead, he landed in the Caribbean. But here's the key mistake. Columbus thought he had reached islands near India. That's why he called the native people Indians. Even after multiple voyages, he never realized he had discovered a completely new continent. Europe didn't fully understand the size or importance of this land for a long time. And even more surprising, communication between continents was extremely limited at that time. So information spread very slowly. Many explorers after Columbus still believed they had reached parts of Asia rather than an entirely separate landmass. It took years of exploration, mapping, and observation before people finally understood that this was a new world and not just the edge of Asia. Europe ignores a continent. At first, Spain and Portugal were the main explorers. They divided the world using a line on a map, the Treaty of Tordesillas. Spain got most of the Americas, while Portugal focused on Africa and Asia. But here's the twist. They didn't realize what they were dealing with. Spain focused on the richest regions, South America and the Caribbean, where gold and silver were found. North America? It seemed less valuable at the time. So for decades, much of North America was ignored or only lightly explored. Even other European powers like England and France were slow to act. England made early attempts at colonies like Roanoke, but they mysteriously failed. Jamestown, founded in 1607, became the first permanent English settlement, but survival was extremely difficult. Colonies began to grow. Eventually, more settlers arrived. The Pilgrims landed in Plymouth in 1620, seeking religious freedom. Over time, 13 British colonies formed along the East Coast. Life was difficult, but the population grew rapidly. Meanwhile, France controlled large parts of central North America, calling it New France. For years, European powers and indigenous nations competed for control of land, resources, and influence. This eventually led to a major conflict: the French and Indian War. In 1754, war broke out between Britain and France in North America. It's called the French and Indian War because both sides allied with different indigenous groups. Britain had more settlers and resources and eventually won. But victory came at a cost. Britain was heavily in debt and decided the American colonies should help pay for it. Taxes were introduced on goods like paper, sugar, and tea. At first, these taxes seemed small, but they quickly became a major source of tension. Many colonists felt they were being taxed without having a real voice in the British government. This idea led to growing frustration and protests across the colonies. Over time, boycotts and resistance movements began to spread. What started as a financial decision by Britain slowly turned into a political conflict. Tensions continued to rise as Britain tried to enforce its laws more strictly, while the colonies pushed back harder. This growing divide would eventually set the stage for one of the most important revolutions in history: the American War of Independence. Taxes, anger, and revolution. The British imposed new taxes on the colonies, but the colonists were angry. "We didn't vote for this. Why should we pay?" Tensions grew quickly. This disagreement turned into protest, then resistance, then full rebellion. People began organizing boycotts against British goods. In cities and towns, anger toward British rule kept increasing. What started as frustration over taxes slowly became a larger question about freedom, rights, and self-governance. On July 4, 1776, the American colonies declared independence from Britain. This document didn't end the conflict, but it marked a powerful shift in history. The colonies were officially breaking away and forming a new nation. But independence wasn't immediate. A war followed that lasted years. The fighting was difficult, and both sides faced major challenges. The colonies had fewer resources, but they had strong motivation and growing unity. International support also played a role later in the conflict. In the end, the colonies won, and the United States of America was born. This moment reshaped global history, influencing ideas about democracy, government, and individual rights that continue to impact the world today. A nation almost fails. However, after independence, things were far from stable. The 13 colonies acted like separate mini-countries. The central government was weak and ineffective. The country was close to collapse. To fix this, leaders created a new constitution, forming a stronger federal government. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. The country had survived, but it was still small, weak, and limited to the East Coast. The Louisiana Purchase, doubling the country. Everything changed in 1803. France, under Napoleon, controlled a massive territory called Louisiana. But Napoleon needed money for wars in Europe. So he made a shocking decision. He sold the entire territory to the United States for $15 million. This deal doubled the size of America overnight. Suddenly, the U.S. stretched deep into the continent. Westward expansion. As the population grew, Americans moved west in search of land and opportunity. The government made more land deals. Florida was bought from Spain. Texas joined after independence. A war with Mexico added huge territories in the Southwest. The Oregon Territory was shared with Britain. By the mid-1800s, the United States stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. It seemed unstoppable: gold, growth, and conflict. Then came the California gold rush. Thousands rushed west hoping to strike it rich. Cities grew overnight. The economy expanded rapidly. But inside the country, a serious problem was growing: slavery. Northern states opposed it. Southern states depended on it economically. This disagreement became so severe that it led to civil war. The Civil War. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln became president. Many Southern states feared slavery would be abolished, so they left the Union and formed their own government. The United States was now divided. A brutal civil war began. It lasted 4 years. In the end, the North won, the country stayed united, and slavery was abolished. But the cost was enormous, becoming a continental power. After the war, the U.S. continued expanding. Alaska was purchased from Russia. Hawaii was eventually annexed. The U.S. gained influence in the Caribbean and Pacific. Then came the Spanish-American War in 1898. The United States defeated Spain and gained control over territories like Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. America was no longer just a regional nation, it was becoming a global power. The Panama Canal and global influence. In the early 1900s, the United States built the Panama Canal, one of the greatest engineering projects in history. It connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, making global trade and military movement much faster. This gave the U.S. massive strategic power. By 1914, when World War I began, America was already rising as a major world influence. From unknown land to superpower. In just a few centuries, America transformed completely, from unknown continents on old maps, to colonies struggling to survive, to an independent nation fighting for identity. to a continental power stretching coast to coast, and finally to a rising global superpower. But it didn't happen smoothly. It happened through exploration, conflict, expansion, and constant change. The story of America is not just about land or wars. It's about how a place once ignored by the world became one of its most powerful nations. And it all started with a simple mistake: thinking it was something else entirely.